In the olden days of the Wild West, peculiar and unsettling occurrences were simply part of everyday existence. What strikes us as odd or terrifying today was entirely unremarkable to them. So, let's explore some of those strange customs that people scarcely gave a second thought to. During the Wild West era, when an individual faced execution by hanging for offenses like murder, theft, or cattle rustling, the entire populace would gather to observe. Public hangings, viewed as entertainment, neither concealed nor considered disgraceful. They were communal celebrations that drew crowds akin to a modern-day concert. Town records from the 1870s and 1880s indicate that hangings were arranged well in advance, often advertised in local newspapers. Families would pack picnics, children were excused from school, and vendors sold provisions, beverages, and keepsakes. It was essentially a fair-like atmosphere, with the main attraction being someone's demise. The condemned often paraded through town in a wagon, offering spectators a clear view before the execution. Some prisoners delivered speeches from the gallows, confessing their misdeeds or declaring their innocence. The spectators would either cheer or jeer, depending on the prisoner's popularity. A newspaper account from Tombstone, Arizona in 1884 depicted a hanging that attracted over 2,000 onlookers to a town with a mere 2,500 residents. People journeyed from neighboring settlements specifically to witness the execution. Photographers set up their equipment to capture the moment, and these execution photos were sold as postcards and mementos. Individuals collected them, much like we collect concert tickets today, and some families even framed and displayed hanging photos in their homes. The actual hanging procedure was frequently botched. Executioners were not trained professionals. Sometimes the rope was too long, causing the condemned person's feet to touch the ground. Other times it was too short, leading to a slow strangulation rather than a broken neck. These failures merely amplified the spectacle. Children were encouraged to attend as a moral lesson, with parents believing that witnessing an execution would instill in them the repercussions of crime. Town records mention teachers even bringing entire classes to view hangings as educational excursions. The bodies were often left suspended for hours after death, as a warning to others. And some towns exhibited corpses for days. This was not deemed cruel or unusual. It was considered justice, entertainment, and education, all merged into one public spectacle. While public hangings offered a form of amusement, Wild West saloons provided their own brand of perilous recreation. Entering any Wild West saloon and ordering a whiskey might yield more than anticipated. The whiskey itself was often homemade rot gut that could cause blindness, yet many bartenders infused their concoctions with special ingredients to enhance their appeal. Cocaine, morphine, and other substances were perfectly legal and commonly mixed into alcoholic beverages. Patent medicines of that era contained astonishing quantities of drugs. A popular tonic known as cocoa wine contained cocaine extracted from cocoa leaves blended with wine. Advertisements touted its ability to cure everything from depression to impotence, and even respectable women drank it daily. Laudanum, a combination of opium and alcohol, was available in every general store. People consumed it for headaches, toothaches, coughs, and almost any ailment. A typical dose contained enough opium to induce a significant high. Mothers administered it to crying infants to aid their sleep. Bartenders discovered that adding small amounts of cocaine or morphine to whiskey made patrons feel euphoric and inclined to drink more. Some saloons gained renown for their special whiskey that provided an extra kick, and cowboys would travel for miles out of their way to visit saloons offering the best enhanced drinks. A pharmacist's journal from 1882 describes a popular saloon beverage called the dynamite, which combined whiskey, cocaine, and a hint of strychnine. Yes, strychnine, which is rat poison. In small doses, it acted as a stimulant, and the journal notes that patrons claimed it made them feel invincible. Nobody understood addiction then as we do now. When someone became reliant on these substances, it was perceived as a moral failing rather than a medical condition. Towns were filled with individuals unknowingly addicted to the drugs in their daily beverages and medicines. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 eventually mandated manufacturers to list ingredients, and when people discovered what they had been consuming, public outrage led to regulations. Some historians estimate that up to 30% of the adult population in frontier towns had some degree of drug dependency, mostly without realizing it. Nearly 1 in 3 people walking around under the influence of substances they believed to be medicine. While the living sought their highs in saloons, photographers were cultivating an even more unsettling trend with the deceased. Photography was costly and uncommon in the Wild West, with most individuals never having their picture taken while alive. Consequently, upon someone's death, families regarded it as their final opportunity to capture an image of their loved one. This gave rise to the eerie practice of post-mortem photography, but it grew even stranger. Photographers didn't merely photograph corpses lying down, they posed them. They propped dead bodies in chairs, positioned them standing with the aid of special stands, and arranged them in lifelike postures. The objective was to make the deceased appear alive in the photograph. Specialized photography stands were specifically designed for supporting corpses. These metal frames featured clamps and supports that kept the body upright and prevented the head from drooping. Photographers would either paint eyes on closed eyelids or prop them open with small wires to create the illusion of life. A photographer's manual from 1875 includes detailed instructions for post-mortem photography, advising, position the deceased in a natural stance as though merely resting. Use rouge to add color to the cheeks and lips. Ensure the eyes appear open and alert. Families would meticulously dress the corpse in their finest attire, style their hair, and sometimes pose them with living family members. These photographs depict deceased children held by their parents and deceased parents surrounded by their children, all arranged to resemble a typical family portrait. The only hint is that one person might look slightly blurred or possess an unnervingly vacant gaze. The practice was particularly prevalent with deceased children. Infant mortality was exceptionally high in the Wild West, with many children dying before their first birthday. For grieving parents, a post-mortem photograph was their sole image of their child. Some photographers specialized in post-mortem work and advertised their services. A newspaper advertisement from Denver in 1883 read, "Secure a lasting memory of your departed loved one. Expert post-mortem photography. Bodies posed naturally. Satisfaction guaranteed." These photos were displayed in homes, carried in lockets, and sent to distant relatives. What we find profoundly unsettling today was considered a normal, even comforting practice then, a means to remember the dead and cope with the constant presence of death in frontier life. Speaking of death, medical care in the Wild West was rudimentary and frequently more hazardous than the illnesses it purported to treat. Encountering a toothache in the Wild West left one with two choices: endure the torment or have it extracted. And by extracted, we mean forcibly removed from your skull while fully conscious, feeling every agonizing second. Anesthesia existed by the 1860s, but it was expensive, difficult to transport, and many frontier dentists lacked access to it. Even when available, some dentists distrusted it or lacked proper knowledge of its use. So, they simply grabbed their pliers and commenced work. The procedure was precisely as awful as it sounds. The dentist would have robust men restrain the patient in a chair, and the patient would clench a leather strap to muffle their screams. Then, the dentist would grasp the tooth with metal pliers and pull, twist, and wrench until it came free. A dentist's journal from 1878 described the process matter-of-factly. Patient required restraint by 3 men. Extraction of upper molar took approximately 4 minutes of sustained force. Patient fainted twice, but was revived to complete the procedure. Occasionally, teeth fractured during extraction, leaving roots embedded in the jaw. The dentist would then have to probe into the gums with sharp instruments to remove the fragments, all while the patient was awake and fully experiencing the pain. Infections were common post-extraction. Without antibiotics or adequate sterilization, many developed abscesses that spread to their jaw or bloodstream. Some even succumbed to infections that originated from a simple tooth pulling. Whiskey was the most prevalent form of pain management. Dentists would provide patients with a bottle and instruct them to drink as much as possible before the procedure. Some patients were so intoxicated they could barely sit upright, yet still felt the pain. Barbers frequently served as dentists in small frontier towns. The same individual who cut your hair would extract your teeth. Their qualifications essentially amounted to, "I possess pliers and am willing to attempt it." Medical training was minimal or non-existent. While dentists subjected patients to torture for medical reasons, another Wild West practice involved violence for financial gain. The act of scalping is frequently associated with Native Americans, but the reality is more intricate and much grimmer. Many frontier territories and Mexican states offered bounties for Native American scalps, transforming murder into a lucrative enterprise. Bounty amounts varied, but were substantial. In the 1830s and 1840s, some Mexican states offered 100 pesos for an adult male scalp, 50 pesos for a female scalp, and 25 pesos for a child's scalp, an amount equivalent to several months' wages for a working man. This gave rise to a horrifying industry of scalp hunters. Groups of men would track down Native American villages, attack them, kill as many as they could, and collect the scalps to claim their monetary reward. These individuals were not soldiers or lawmen, but bounty hunters driven solely by profit. A historical record from Chihuahua, Mexico, in 1837 details the actions of James Kirker, a scalp hunter who led a group responsible for the demise of over 400 Apache individuals within a single year. He submitted their scalps and amassed thousands of pesos in bounty payments, earning him acclaim as a hero among settlers. This system was rife with exploitation. Scalp hunters quickly discovered that authorities couldn't differentiate between Native American scalps and those from Mexicans or Caucasians. Consequently, some hunters began targeting anyone they encountered, including peaceful Mexican villagers, falsely claiming their scalps belonged to hostile Native Americans. A government report from 1849 highlighted how the scalp bounty system led to the murder of numerous innocent Mexican citizens, whose hair was presented as Apache scalps. Towns had specific officials tasked with inspecting and compensating for these scalps. One can imagine entering a government office and witnessing dozens of human scalps spread across a table, being tallied and paid for akin to animal furs. This was a common practice in many frontier settlements. Some scalp hunters preserved their collections as trophies, and saloons often displayed scalps as decor. A traveler's account from 1852 described a New Mexico saloon adorned with at least 30 scalps dangling from the rafters, each signifying a kill by the establishment's owner. This practice gradually faded in the late 1800s as territories transitioned into states and formal law enforcement superseded vigilante justice. Nevertheless, for decades, selling human scalps was a legitimate, government-sanctioned method of earning money in the Wild West. While scalp hunters profited from death, frontier towns grappled with the disposal of numerous bodies. Frontier boomtowns expanded faster than their infrastructure could manage. Upon the discovery of gold or silver, thousands of people would descend upon these areas within weeks. Housing was scarce, forcing individuals to sleep wherever space allowed, sometimes sharing rooms with corpses. In mining camps and rapidly growing towns, proper morgues or undertakers were often non-existent. When someone died, their body might remain in a boarding house, saloon, or shared room for days until burial arrangements could be made, with other residents simply enduring the situation. A miner's diary entry from Deadwood, South Dakota, in 1876 casually notes, "Johnson died of fever last night. His body remains in the corner of our cabin, as we have no place to move it. The smell is becoming difficult. We hope the undertaker arrives tomorrow." Shared sleeping arrangements were prevalent. Men paid for floor space or a shared bed in crowded boarding houses. If someone passed away overnight, their body would be moved aside and everyone else would continue sleeping in the same room, as there was no other option. During disease outbreaks, the problem intensified. Cholera, typhoid, and other diseases could claim dozens of lives in a small town within days. Bodies accumulated faster than they could be buried. A newspaper article from a Colorado mining camp in 1878 recounted bodies stacked in the general store, awaiting burial, with customers navigating around them to make purchases. The absence of refrigeration meant bodies decomposed rapidly, especially in summer. The pervasive odor was overwhelming, yet people had no alternative but to tolerate it. Perfumes and strong tobacco were used to mask the stench. Some boarding houses had a policy that if a guest died, their body would be removed within 24 hours, but the deceased would still be charged for the full week's rent. Hotels and saloons sometimes utilized their basements or back rooms as temporary morgues, with guests dining or drinking upstairs while bodies were stored below. Children grew up constantly exposed to death. It was neither concealed nor sanitized. Deceased bodies were an intrinsic part of the landscape, and children learned to accept this as normal. This perpetual encounter with mortality fostered a culture far more at ease with death than modern society. While people slept alongside cadavers, frontier doctors prescribed treatments that frequently exacerbated their patients' conditions. Mercury was revered as a miracle cure in the Wild West, prescribed by physicians for ailments ranging from syphilis to constipation. The inherent toxicity of mercury, however, meant it was slowly poisoning patients, even as doctors believed they were administering healing. The most common mercury treatment was calomel, or mercurous chloride. Doctors dispensed it as a powder or pill for digestive issues, infections, and general illnesses. A typical dose contained enough mercury to induce serious health complications. Mercury was particularly favored for treating syphilis, a widespread affliction in frontier towns. Physicians would give patients mercury pills or apply mercury ointment to their skin. This treatment often led to excessive salivation, tooth loss, and tremors. Doctors interpreted these symptoms as evidence of the medicine's efficacy, believing it was expelling the disease. An 1870 medical journal outlined the mercury treatment protocol. Administer calomel until the patient begins to salivate profusely. Continue treatment until teeth loosen and gums recede. This indicates the medicine is effectively purging the disease from the body. In reality, the mercury was inducing mercury poisoning, with symptoms including kidney damage, brain damage, tooth loss, tremors, and personality alterations. Many patients succumbed to the treatment rather than their original illness. Some doctors employed even more aggressive mercury therapies, enclosing patients in sealed boxes with mercury vapor, forcing them to inhale toxic fumes, or injecting liquid mercury directly into their bodies. Mercury was also used for other conditions. Teething infants were given mercury powder to rub on their gums, pregnant women took mercury pills, and cowboys used mercury ointment for saddle sores. It was pervasive, poisoning everyone who used it. The effects were cumulative. Individuals who underwent repeated mercury treatments over years developed severe neurological damage. The idiom, "mad as a hatter," originated from hatmakers who utilized mercury in their trade and consequently suffered brain damage from chronic exposure. It wasn't until the early 1900s that doctors began to comprehend mercury's toxicity. By then, generations of Wild West residents had been poisoned by their own medicine. While adults were being poisoned by doctors, children in frontier schools faced their own distinct hazards. In many frontier communities, children as young as 8 or 9 carried guns to school. This was not considered dangerous or inappropriate. It was deemed practical and expected. Frontier schools were often miles from students' homes, requiring children to walk long distances through wilderness where they might encounter dangerous animals such as wolves, bears, or mountain lions. A gun was therefore seen as essential protection. Many families depended on their children for hunting food. Children would shoot rabbits, squirrels, or birds on their way to or from school, bringing home meat for dinner. Teachers understood this and permitted students to store their rifles in the schoolhouse during lessons. A teacher's diary from Montana in 1882 noted, "Most of my students arrive armed. We have a designated corner for firearms. The children are quite responsible with their weapons, more so than with their arithmetic homework." Some schools even organized shooting competitions during recess, where teachers would set up targets for students to practice their marksmanship. This was considered a valuable life skill, on par with reading or arithmetic. The guns were not toys, they were real, loaded firearms. Accidents did occur. A newspaper report from Wyoming in 1879 described a 10-year-old boy who accidentally shot himself in the leg while retrieving his rifle from the school's gun rack. The article treated it as an unfortunate accident, without questioning the presence of guns in schools. Conflicts between students sometimes dangerously escalated. A school board report from New Mexico in 1885 mentioned implementing a rule that students must leave their guns outside after 2 boys had a fight and one reached for his rifle. This practice persisted well into the early 1900s in remote areas. As towns became more settled and threats from wild animals diminished, schools gradually prohibited weapons. However, for decades, armed children in classrooms were completely normal. While children were armed and faced peril, adults grappled with their own hygiene challenges, or more accurately, the lack thereof. The stereotype of the dirty, malodorous cowboy is not merely a stereotype. it is a historical fact. Most people in the Wild West bathed once or twice a year, if at all. Regular bathing was considered unnecessary and even hazardous. Water was a scarce resource in many frontier regions, and hauling and heating enough water for a bath required immense effort. Most people could not spare the time, energy, or resources for frequent bathing. Medical beliefs of the era also discouraged bathing. Many doctors believed that bathing too often weakened the body and increased susceptibility to disease, contending that the layer of dirt and oil on the skin provided protection against illness. A medical text from 1875 cautioned, "Excessive bathing removes the body's natural protective coating and opens the pores to dangerous miasmas and disease. 1 or 2 baths per year is sufficient for health." Cowboys on cattle drives went months without bathing, sleeping in their clothes, working in dust and heat, and lacking access to bathing facilities. The stench of a cattle drive crew was legendary, with one account describing the odor as visibly discernible from a distance, akin to a shimmering heat wave of putridity. Women bathed slightly more often than men, but still rarely by modern standards. A lady's etiquette book from 1880 suggested bathing no more than once per month, as excessive washing was believed to damage the complexion and feminine constitution. When people did bathe, they often shared the same bath water. The entire family would use the same tub of water sequentially. By the time the last person bathed, the water was utterly filthy. The common saying, "Don't throw the baby out with the bath water," originates from this period. Poor hygiene led to widespread skin conditions, lice infestations, and various other health issues. However, people failed to connect cleanliness with well-being, simply enduring constant itching and skin problems as a normal part of life. Perfumes and colognes were popular not for their luxurious appeal, but to mask body odor. Individuals would go months without bathing, yet douse themselves in strong fragrances. This combination of body odor and inexpensive perfume created a unique frontier smell. Attitudes towards bathing began to shift in the late 1800s as germ theory gained acceptance and indoor plumbing became more prevalent. Yet, for most of the Wild West era, being unclean was simply how people lived. While personal hygiene was generally neglected, another aspect of frontier life was even more overtly troubling. Prostitution was legal and openly practiced in many Wild West towns. Red light districts were officially designated areas, with prostitutes displayed in windows much like merchandise, allowing customers to browse before making a selection. This window display system was brutally dehumanizing. Women would sit or stand in large windows, often in revealing attire, as men walked by and scrutinized them. It was, essentially, shopping for human beings. Some brothels featured multiple windows, each with different women, offering customers a wider selection. These women would pose, smile, and attempt to attract patrons, knowing their income depended on being chosen. A visitor's account from San Francisco in 1870 described the red light district. "The street is lined with establishments where women sit in windows like goods on display. Men stroll past, examining the offerings, as one might browse a shop window. The women call out prices and services." This practice was most common in mining and cattle towns, where men significantly outnumbered women. Prostitution provided one of the few avenues for women to earn substantial money on the frontier. Despite the work being dangerous and degrading, era-specific town maps frequently clearly marked red light districts. An 1877 map of Deadwood, for instance, shows an entire street labeled Prostitution Row, with individual brothels named and numbered. This was not concealed or deemed shameful. It was an accepted part of the town's infrastructure. Some towns regulated prostitution through licensing systems. Women were required to register, pay fees, and undergo medical examinations. A Dodge City town ordinance from 1878 mandated that prostitutes display their license number prominently in their window. These women faced continuous health risks. Sexually transmitted diseases were rampant, and medical treatment was scarce. Violence from customers was common, and legal protection was minimal. Many prostitutes succumbed prematurely to disease, violence, or suicide. The practice of window displays receded in the early 1900s as progressive reform movements advocated for the criminalization of prostitution, or at least its concealment from public view. Nevertheless, for decades, it remained a normal, visible facet of Wild West towns. While prostitutes faced their own perils, anyone needing surgery encountered horrors that are difficult to fathom today. Need a leg amputated in the Wild West? You'd better be able to withstand pain, because you'd be conscious throughout the entire procedure. Surgical anesthesia existed, but wasn't always available, especially in secluded areas. Surgeons often performed major operations on fully awake patients. The process was precisely as terrifying as it sounds. The patient would be held down by several strong men. A leather strap would be placed in their mouth for them to bite on. Then, the surgeon would begin cutting. Amputation involved sawing through bone. The sound and sensation of a saw cutting through your own leg bone while conscious is indescribable. Patients would scream, thrash, and sometimes pass out from the agony. Those who fainted were considered fortunate. A surgeon's journal from 1873 recounts an amputation. Patient remained conscious throughout the procedure, despite consuming a full bottle of whiskey beforehand. His screams were heard throughout the camp. 4 men were required to restrain him. The operation took 18 minutes from first incision to final stitch. Speed was paramount. The faster the surgeon completed the amputation, the less the patient suffered and the less blood they lost. Skilled surgeons could amputate a leg in under 10 minutes. Slower surgeons might take 30 minutes or more, often leading to the patient's death from shock or blood loss. Following amputation, the wound would be cauterized with a red-hot iron to stop the bleeding. Imagine having your leg sawed off while conscious, then having a glowing hot iron pressed into the wound. Some patients died from shock during cauterization. Infection rates after surgery were incredibly high. Without antibiotics or proper sterilization, most amputations resulted in infections. Many patients survived the surgery only to die days or weeks later from gangrene or blood poisoning. Some frontier doctors gained renown for their surgical speed and dexterity. A doctor in Texas was known as 3-Minute Thompson because he could amputate a leg in under 3 minutes. Patients traveled considerable distances to see him because his swiftness meant less suffering. While surgeons were severing limbs, some individuals were voluntarily poisoning themselves in the name of beauty. Pale, unblemished skin was the beauty ideal during the Wild West era. Women, and some men, went to extreme lengths to achieve it, including ingesting arsenic, a deadly poison. Arsenic was believed to enhance complexion by making skin pale and smooth. It was sold in pills, powders, and liquids, specifically marketed for beauty purposes. Advertisements promised a complexion of alabaster perfection and skin as smooth as porcelain. The practice was particularly popular among women, but men also used arsenic products. An 1880 beauty manual recommended a small dose of arsenic daily to maintain a youthful, luminous complexion free from blemishes. Arsenic does temporarily improve skin appearance by causing slight swelling that smooths out wrinkles and blemishes, but it also accumulates in the body, causing severe damage to internal organs. A popular product called Dr. Mackenzie's Arsenic Complexion Wafers was sold across the West. The label claimed they were perfectly safe and would produce a complexion of transcendent loveliness. Each wafer contained enough arsenic to cause health problems with regular use. Users experienced side effects including nausea, vomiting, hair loss, and nerve damage. Long-term use led to organ failure and death. However, because the effects were gradual, people didn't connect their deteriorating health to their beauty regimen. Some women became addicted to arsenic. The poison can create a physical dependence, and abrupt cessation causes withdrawal symptoms. Users would increase their doses over time, accelerating the poisoning process. A doctor's case notes from 1885 describe a patient. Young woman aged 24, presenting with tremors, hair loss, and digestive distress. Upon questioning, admits to consuming arsenic wafers daily for 3 years to maintain her complexion. Advised immediate cessation, but patient refuses, stating she cannot bear to lose her beauty. The arsenic beauty trend declined in the early 1900s as medical understanding improved and regulations were introduced. But for decades, people willingly poisoned themselves in pursuit of beauty. While some individuals intentionally poisoned themselves, others faced an accidental horror that haunted the Wild West. One of the most terrifying aspects of Wild West medicine was the difficulty in determining if someone was truly deceased. Medical knowledge was limited, and doctors sometimes declared people dead who were actually in comas or deep unconscious states. This led to people being buried alive. The fear of premature burial was widespread and justified. Newspapers regularly reported cases of coffins being opened to reveal scratch marks on the inside of the lid, or bodies found in positions suggesting they had tried to escape. Diseases like cholera, typhoid, and certain types of poisoning could induce a death-like state where breathing and heartbeat became almost imperceptible. Without modern medical equipment, doctors lacked reliable ways to confirm death. A newspaper article from Colorado in 1879 describes a horrifying discovery. Upon opening the family crypt to add a new burial, workers discovered that the coffin of Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, buried 3 months prior, had been torn open from the inside. Her body was found face down, her fingernails broken and bloody from clawing at the coffin lid. The fear became so pervasive that some people included instructions in their wills for tests to confirm death. These included stabbing the body with pins, cutting arteries to check for blood flow, or waiting several days before burial to ensure decomposition had begun. Wealthy individuals sometimes purchased safety coffins that included bells or flags connected to the buried person by a string. If they awakened underground, they could ring the bell or raise the flag to alert those above ground. The phrase, "saved by the bell," may originate from this practice. Some towns employed cemetery watchers who patrolled graveyards at night, listening for bells or sounds from graves. A town record from Tombstone mentions paying a night watchman specifically to listen of premature burial. There are documented cases of people being rescued after premature burial. A medical journal from 1877 describes a woman who was declared dead from fever, buried, and then heard screaming from her grave by a passing gravedigger the next day. She was exhumed and survived, albeit with severe psychological trauma. The problem was serious enough that some states enacted laws requiring a waiting period before burial. An 1889 California statute stipulated that bodies had to be retained for at least 24 hours prior to burial, ensuring that death had genuinely occurred. While some individuals dreaded the prospect of being interred alive, others actively pursued a different hazardous substance for their daily routines. Opium served as the ubiquitous stimulant of the Wild West. People habitually and frequently consumed it for vitality, pain alleviation, and tranquility. Opium dens were as prevalent as coffee shops, with addiction being widespread. Opium was lawful, inexpensive, and readily available. General stores stocked it alongside flour and sugar. No prescription was required, making it accessible to anyone, even children. Chinese immigrants introduced opium smoking to America, and its use rapidly permeated beyond their communities. Opium dens emerged in every major settlement, offering a space for smoking and relaxation. These establishments were not covert underground operations. Rather, they were legitimate businesses that openly advertised their services. A San Francisco newspaper advertisement from 1875 read, "Wong's Opium Den, finest quality opium, clean pipes, comfortable accommodations, open daily from noon until midnight. All respectable persons welcome." Opium found favor across all social strata. Cowboys indulged after extended cattle drives, miners utilized it to cope with perilous work, and businessmen frequented opium dens during lunch breaks. Women employed opium-based remedies for female ailments. An 1880 visitor's account vividly depicted an opium den in Denver. The room was softly illuminated and infused with a sweet, pervasive smoke. Approximately 20 individuals reclined on benches, some actively smoking, while others were already lost in opium-induced reveries. The atmosphere was one of profound quietude and peace. Opium addiction was remarkably common, with estimates indicating that by the 1890s, up to 5% of the American populace was dependent on opium or its derivatives. A staggering 1 in every 20 people. Many individuals became addicted inadvertently, initially taking opium-based medicines for pain or illness, only to discover an insurmountable inability to cease without enduring severe withdrawal symptoms. Doctors liberally prescribed opium, unaware of its addictive properties. Children were routinely given opium, teething infants received opium drops, and sick children were administered opium syrup. A children's remedy named Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup, containing morphine, opium's active ingredient, was marketed to mothers as a means to calm fretful babies. The casual consumption of opium diminished following the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, which mandated ingredient labeling, and subsequent legislation that restricted opium sales. Nevertheless, for decades, the Wild West operated as much on opium as it did on coffee and whiskey. While opium users were at least ingesting a genuine drug, some individuals were purchasing an even more perilous substance disguised as medicine. In one of the most bizarre and dangerous practices of the Wild West, embalming fluid was marketed and sold as a health tonic. People consumed formaldehyde-based solutions, believing they were enhancing their well-being. This practice originated from a misunderstanding of preservation. Observing that embalming fluid preserved deceased bodies by preventing decay, some entrepreneurs concluded that if it preserved dead tissue, it might also preserve living tissue and thwart the aging process. Products bearing names such as Ratham's Microbe Killer and Dr. Pierce's favorite prescription contained formaldehyde and other embalming chemicals. Advertisements boldly proclaimed their ability to maintain youth, ward off illness, and purify the blood. A newspaper advertisement from 1890 for a product called Eternal Youth Tonic declared, "Contains the same preservative compounds used by professional embalmers, prevents the decay of bodily tissues, maintains youthful vigor indefinitely." Thousands of satisfied customers. These products were, in essence, poison. Formaldehyde inflicts severe damage on the digestive system, kidneys, and liver. Even minute quantities can induce nausea, vomiting, and internal bleeding, with regular use frequently culminating in fatality. An 1892 medical examiner's report detailed a death investigation, noting, "Deceased was found to have consumed a health tonic containing formaldehyde for approximately 6 months. Autopsy reveals severe damage to stomach lining and liver. Cause of death determined to be poisoning from the tonic she believed was preserving her health." The absence of regulation meant that anyone could manufacture and distribute these concoctions. No testing was required, nor was any proof of safety or effectiveness needed. If one could print a label and fill a bottle, they were in the medicine business. Traveling salesmen peddled these tonics from wagons, moving from town to town, delivering elaborate presentations on the science of preservation and the benefits of their wares. By the time customers fell ill, the salesman had long since departed. This practice finally ceased with increased regulation in the early 1900s. The 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act and subsequent laws rendered the sale of dangerous substances as medicine illegal. Yet for years, people in the Wild West were ingesting embalming fluid and referring to it as healthcare. These 15 unsettling practices constituted normal life in the Wild West. From public hangings to embalming fluid tonics, people accepted realities that would undeniably horrify us today. The frontier was an unforgiving place where death was common, medicine was perilous, and what we now consider fundamental human dignity often remained elusive.